Hello, I'm Dennis Snow. This is Speaking of Service Excellence. A handful of times during my consulting and speaking career, I've been accused of oversimplifying the process for creating a service culture, that I make it sound too easy. And it used to really bother me when people would say that, but it really doesn't anymore, because what I've come to realize is most organizations tend to overcomplicate anything that they take on, any new initiative. And they often overcomplicate the initiative to the point where nothing changes. People just freeze. It's just too complicated. So I think it's important to keep the process simple. Now, that doesn't mean that the execution is easy. That still takes commitment, it takes relentlessness, it takes time, but the process itself doesn't have to be complicated. So in the course of this very short video, I'm going to share with you a 4-step process that I believe really does result in a culture of service excellence. So here goes. Step number 1, define your service culture. And while on the surface that might sound difficult, what does that mean? It really isn't. What are the 3 things that you want customers to say about any experience that they have with your organization? What are the 3 things that you want them to say about their experience? So from my days working at Disney World, it was a magical experience. They paid attention to every detail, and they made me and my children feel special. We knew that if guests said those 3 things, it dramatically increased the likelihood they were going to come back. And that was the name of the game. And it also increased the likelihood that they were going to tell people about their experience there. So those 3 things. Once you have defined those 3 things that you want customers to say about their experience, it then becomes pretty easy to define the behaviors that will lead customers to say those things. So, for example, if one of the things we wanted people to say, they paid attention to every detail. So as a cast member, as an employee, if you see a piece of trash on the ground, you go over and you pick it up and you throw it away. If we want people to say, they made me and my children feel special. If you see a guest getting ready to take a photograph of their family, to go over to them and say, can I take the photo for you so that you can be in the photo also? So it becomes very apparent what those behaviors need to be that will lead customers to say those things that will result in customer loyalty. So that's step number 1, define the service culture. Step number 2 is to make sure that we have a hiring process that is bringing people into the organization who are likely to perform those behaviors. So to make sure that we have a carefully designed and orchestrated interviewing and selection process that's built around those behaviors, so that the people coming in they're hardwired to perform that way. So it's as simple as that, a clearly defined behavioral interview process. Step number 3 then is making sure that we have a training process that reinforces those behaviors over and over, starting with new hire orientation all the way through to when somebody leaves the organization. And training isn't just classroom training. It's any type of communication. So classroom training is certainly a part of it, but what are we talking about in our team meetings? What are we putting into our employee newsletter? What are we discussing one-on-one? What are we talking about in our memos? And all of those, are those things reinforcing the behaviors that define our service culture? And then step number 4, are we holding people accountable for those behaviors? So if somebody is not performing those behaviors that we've defined, are we coaching them? So are those behaviors truly non-negotiable, or are they just wishes? Now, there's 2 sides to the accountability coin. I think coaching is one side, but the other side of the accountability coin is recognition. When somebody is really living our service values, are we acknowledging that performance? Are we reinforcing it with recognition? So that's it. Those 4 things: defining our service culture, making sure that we have a hiring process that brings people in that are wired to perform that way, making sure that we are training people constantly and relentlessly on those service behaviors, and holding people accountable for it. Those 4 things. Now, I know that there may be some people screaming about, well, what about measurement, and what about Six Sigma, and what about all of these other things? And I will say that those things are important. Those things definitely do add to a service culture. But I believe that the 4 things that I've described here are at the core of the process, and everything else just adds to it. So if you want to build a service culture where everybody is focused on delivering an outstanding experience, I believe those 4 steps are at the heart of the matter. And it's as simple as that.